You will spend an estimated 150 hours pulling weeds in your yard this year. That is nearly 4 full work weeks on your knees doing the same job over and over with nothing to show for it 2 weeks later. These 9 ground covers make that number drop to almost 0 permanently, and the one at number 3 spreads so fast it outpaces every weed that tries to compete with it. Drop your state in the comments right now because your USDA zone completely determines which of these 9 ground covers will work fastest in your specific yard. I will be calling out zones throughout this entire video. Find yours and pay close attention to what applies directly to you. Plant number 2 on this list has been suppressing weeds in American gardens for over 200 years, and most people growing it have no idea that is what it is doing. And plant number 9 works in the one spot that defeats every other ground cover, the dry shade under mature trees where you have probably given up trying to grow anything. Stay through to the end because that one solves a problem most American gardeners consider permanent. Plant number 1, creeping thyme. Every patch of bare soil in your yard is an open invitation for weeds. Creeping thyme answers that invitation permanently, spreading to fill every gap, sealing every opening, and creating a living surface so dense that weed seeds simply cannot find soil to germinate in. That is not a temporary fix. That is a permanent change to what your yard allows to grow. Creeping thyme spreads 12 to 18 inches per year, forming an interlocking mat that physically blocks weed seeds from reaching soil. That mat creates a microclimate at ground level, lower temperature, reduced light penetration that makes germination of common weeds essentially impossible underneath established coverage. And foot traffic triggers oil release from the leaves. The same thymol compound that makes thyme antibacterial in your kitchen creates a naturally hostile environment for competing plants every time you walk across it. If you are in USDA zones 4 through 9, and that covers the vast majority of the continental United States, creeping thyme grows as a cold-hardy perennial that handles freezes without any protection. In zones 4 and 5, it stays evergreen through winter, providing weed suppression without seasonal gaps. In zones 7 through 9, it is drought-tolerant once established, spreading fastest in the hot, dry conditions that defeat most other ground covers by August. For varieties, elfin thyme is the most compact option, perfect for filling gaps between paving stones and stepping stones, forming a surface so dense it resembles installed carpet. Pink chintz produces masses of soft pink flowers in summer, ornamental enough for your most visible front yard areas. Red creeping thyme has vivid magenta flowers and spreads slightly faster than elfin, the best choice if you need to cover large areas quickly. Creeping thyme spreads faster and stays more compact in poor lean soil than in rich amended beds. Every instinct tells you to improve your soil before planting. With creeping thyme, the opposite approach produces better results. Plant it in your worst soil and watch it perform at its absolute best. Bark mulch costs money every single season, breaks down by midsummer, requires physical installation, and still lets weeds through. Creeping thyme costs one planting and provides denser, more permanent weed suppression that improves every year. After 3 seasons, the comparison is not even close. If you are watching this and you are not subscribed yet, here's what that means practically. Every week, this channel releases content specifically designed to make American gardening easier, less expensive, and less physically demanding. Content built around what actually works in real American yards across real American climate zones. Not generic advice, that sounds good, but doesn't apply to your soil, your zone. Subscribing is free. The weeding hours you save from acting on this information are yours to spend however you choose. Hit subscribe right now, and make sure this keeps reaching you every single week. Plant number 2, white clover. White clover fixes atmospheric nitrogen through root nodule. That means it fertilizes the ground it covers continuously all season at 0 cost to you, while simultaneously suppressing every weed that tries to share that ground. Research confirms covered ground requires 60 to 80 pH/ntrm less nitrogen supplementation, while maintaining equivalent vigor. You are not just eliminating weeding, you are improving the soil health of your entire planting area in the process. White clover was a standard component of American lawn and garden mixes through most of the 20th century. Seed companies advertised it as a premium ingredient. Then, in the 1950s, herbicide manufacturers whose products killed clover alongside weeds ran a national campaign deliberately rebranding it as a weed. Within 1 decade, a plant that had been considered a garden asset for generations was officially reclassified as a problem. Not because anything changed about the plant, but because it was more profitable to sell you herbicide than to let your garden fertilize itself for free. That campaign worked, and most American gardeners have been pulling out a free soil amendment ever since. White clover spreads by runners and seeds, simultaneously, filling bare ground faster than most weeds can establish. It stays green through summer drought that turns competing weeds brown and dormant, maintaining suppression through the season when most ground covers take a break. Hardy across zones 3 through 10, the entire continental United States. There is no American climate where this plant does not work. Drop in the comments right now. Did you grow up thinking clover in a lawn or garden was a weed? Because the answer depends entirely on whether that 1950s herbicide marketing reached your household before the traditional knowledge did. I want to know how many people watching this were taught to pull out a plant that was actively working for them the entire time. Plant number 3, Creeping Jenny. This is the fastest spreading ground cover on this entire list, and in the one condition that defeats most other weed suppressors, moderate to deep shade, it performs at its absolute peak, creeping Jenny roots at every single node. Every stem that touches soil becomes a new independent plant. There is no other common ground cover that multiplies at this rate, which means bare ground disappears faster under creeping Jenny than under anything else on this list. You are not waiting for a single plant to slowly expand outward from its center. You are watching an entire network establish itself simultaneously from every direction at once. Each rooting node creates a new anchor point that suppresses weeds in a radius around it, while simultaneously sending out new runners that create more anchor points. The coverage compounds on itself. In the second season, you do not have twice the coverage of the first season. You have 4 or 5 times the coverage, because every plant from year 1 is now producing its own runners. The golden form produces vivid chartreuse foliage that genuinely illuminates shaded areas, brightening dark corners under trees and along north-facing structures, while suppressing weeds simultaneously. In a spot where most plants look washed out and struggle, Creeping Jenny looks intentional and designed. If you are in USDA zones 3 through 9, it is fully cold hardy and returns reliably every spring. It performs best in moist partial shade, the exact condition under trees, and along north-facing walls where most ground covers fail entirely. In zones 7 through 9, provide afternoon shade. The golden form can bleach in intense direct sun, but recovers quickly when conditions improve. Most gardeners try to solve their worst bare ground weed problems with maximum effort, constant mulching, repeated pulling, repeated chemical applications that require repeat purchases every season. Creeping Jenny solves those same problems with 1 planting and 0 follow-up effort. The speed of its spread is not a problem to manage, it is the solution you have been looking for. Grass under trees gets thin, patchy, and requires annual reseeding that never quite takes. Creeping Jenny planted in that same spot fills the space completely within 2 seasons and never requires reseeding again. You stop fighting that specific problem permanently, right here before plant 4. If you are not subscribed yet, I want to ask you something honestly. How many hours have you spent this season alone on your knees pulling the same weeds from the same spot? How many times have you cleared a bed only to find it full again 2 weeks later? Every one of those hours has the same solution, a plant that wants that ground more than the weeds do. This channel exists to match you with those plants every single week. Practical, zone-specific experience-based content that gives you your time back. Subscribe right now, free, always will be. Hit that button before we go any further. Plant number 4, Ajuga bugleweed. Ajuga spreads by runners moving in every direction simultaneously, not outward from a single central point, but from every stem at once, creating an interlocking surface mat that physically prevents weed seedlings from ever reaching enough light to establish themselves. The weeds are not being chemically discouraged, they are being physically crowded out of existence by a plant that simply refuses to leave space for anything else. Professional head gardeners from the 16th century planted ajuga along borders specifically to eliminate weeding labor, not reduce it, eliminate it. Professional head gardeners at those properties Understood something the modern garden industry has spent considerable effort making American homeowners forget. The best weed control is not a product you purchase every season. It is a plant that permanently occupies the space and refuses to give it back. 4 varieties. Black Scallop produces near black glossy leaves that provide the most dramatic foliage color available in any ground cover at this price point. Ornamental enough for your most visible front yard beds. Burgundy Glow has tricolor foliage in burgundy, pink, and white that looks professionally designed without any professional effort or expense. Catlin's Giant produces larger leaves and taller flower spikes than standard ajuga and covers ground measurably faster. The best choice for large problem areas that need rapid coverage. In zones 3 through 9, ajuga is fully cold hardy. In zones 6 through 9, it stays evergreen through winter, providing weed suppression, even in the coldest months, when most ground covers go dormant and leave soil exposed for early spring weed germination. Spreads fastest in moderate shade. The dappled light under trees where grass dies and weeds thrive consistently every season. Those frustrating strips along your fence line, where weeds come back every 2 weeks regardless of what you do, one planting of ajuga, and that problem ends permanently. The plant takes the territory and keeps it. You never go back to that spot with a trowel again. That is what permanent weed suppression actually looks like in practice. Plant number 5. Sweet Woodruff. Medieval European households used sweet woodruff across every corner of domestic life for centuries. Strewn across floors for fragrance, placed in linen storage to repel moths, tucked into wine casks for flavoring. It provided multiple household functions simultaneously, from a single planting that required essentially nothing in return. That same quality, maximum performance with minimum input, is exactly what makes it extraordinary for the most difficult spots in American gardens today. Sweet woodruff spreads by rhizomes through dry compacted soil, where most ground covers cannot establish root systems deep enough to survive. It produces white star-shaped flowers in late spring carrying sweet coumarin fragrance, genuine ornamental value layered on top of its functional weed suppression, and it forms a weed-suppressing mat that requires zero maintenance once established in its target zone. In zones 3 through 8, the entire Northeast, Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, Pacific Northwest, and most of the South, it is fully cold hardy. It specifically thrives in dry shade under mature trees, the exact condition present in most established American suburban yards. In zones 7 and 8, it may go semi-dormant in peak summer heat, but returns fully in fall, providing suppression through the seasons when cool weather weeds are most aggressive. If you have a spot under an old tree where you have tried grass seed, bark mulch, and 3 different plants and given up, sweet woodruff is not another thing to try. It is the answer to that specific problem. It evolved for that exact condition, and it performs there better than anywhere else in your yard. Think right now about one person you know who spends every weekend morning weeding the same spots that come back every single week. One person who has tried mulch, tried chemicals, tried pulling by hand, and is still fighting the same ground every season. Send them this video right now. No message needed, just the link. You might give them back every weekend, morning they currently spend on their knees. Hit share before you forget. Plant number 6. Sedum Stonecrop. This ground cover grows on rooftops without irrigation. What it does in your yard with occasional rainfall is the most effortless weed suppression available to any American gardener regardless of climate zone. Sedum stores water inside its own leaf tissue. Each leaf is an independent reservoir. It does not depend on you, on rainfall schedules, or on soil quality to perform. It depends entirely on itself, which is exactly the quality that makes it the most reliable weed suppressor for hot, dry, difficult spots where every other ground cover gives up by August and leaves bare soil exposed for late summer weed flushes. Traditional Norse and Germanic rooftop gardening used sedum exclusively for centuries, not as one option among several, but as the only plant that reliably survived rooftop conditions without any irrigation infrastructure. Buildings across Scandinavia were insulated and stabilized by sedum through winters that killed everything else. A plant proven on Scandinavian rooftops for 400 years without a single watering is a plant that will handle your dry garden slope without complaint. In zones 3 through 9, it is fully cold hardy. It is most effective as a weed suppressor in zones 6 through 9, where summer drought defeats competing weeds, but does not affect sedum performance at all. In zones 3 through 5, the fall color display, deep red and burgundy tones, peaks in October, providing genuine ornamental value through the season when most ground covers look exhausted and tired. Sedum planted in rich, fertilized soil grows floppy, loses its compact spreading habit, and becomes less effective at suppressing weeds. Sedum planted in your worst, leanest, driest soil stays low, spreads aggressively, and produces its most intense color. Your most neglected, most difficult, most abandoned spot is this plant's preferred habitat. Stop fighting that spot and start planting into it. Plant number 7, Pachysandra. This is the ground cover that professional landscapers install under trees in commercial properties across America. Not because it looks impressive in a sales brochure, but because it works every single season without requiring anything from the maintenance crew. That commercial reliability is the exact quality that makes it extraordinary for American homeowners who are done spending weekends weeding ground that should be covered. Pachysandra creates the most complete weed barrier of any ground cover on this list. A dense, evergreen, year-round surface that never leaves soil exposed regardless of the season. No spring gap when it is still emerging, no fall gap when it is dying back, no winter gap when the ground is bare and vulnerable to early weed germination. 12 months of continuous coverage from one planting that strengthens every year. It spreads by underground stolons, creating a root network so dense that established patches require essentially zero maintenance beyond occasional edging at bed boundaries. It tolerates deep shade, the single most limiting condition in American yard maintenance, performing reliably where no other ground cover on this list is as consistent season after season. In zones 4 through 8, it is fully cold hardy. In zone 4, it may experience winter leaf bronzing in the most exposed spots, but recovers completely in spring and continues spreading without any setback. Best performance comes in zones 5 through 7, under deciduous trees. It actually benefits from the leaf litter that falls as natural mulch on top of established patches, feeding the root system without any input from you. Annual mulch applications for an average yard cost between $200 and $600 per season, require physical installation in spring, break down by midsummer, and still allow weed emergence through the season. Pachysandra planted once under those same trees provides superior weed suppression that improves annually at zero ongoing cost. The financial math over 5 years is not close. The physical effort comparison over 5 years is not close either. Those areas under your trees that you remulch every spring and weed every 2 weeks through summer, one planting of Pachysandra and you redirect every hour you currently spend on those spots to something you actually want to be doing with your time. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have watched this far and still have not hit that button. The gardeners who subscribe here are the ones who stopped fighting their yards and started working with them. They replaced annual maintenance costs with one-time planting investments that pay back every single season. They are the ones their neighbors start asking for advice because their yards look better with less visible effort. If that is the gardener you want to be, and I believe it is, subscribe now, free, always will be. 2 plants remain on this list, and the final one solves the single hardest weed problem in American gardening permanently. Plant number 8, Vinca minor, periwinkle. This ground cover has been growing in American gardens since colonial times, 300 years of continuous American garden use. The reason it survived through 3 centuries of changing garden trends and fashions is the same reason it belongs on this list. It works, it keeps working, and it asks almost nothing in return, year after year. Vinca minor creates one of the most visually attractive weed-suppressing surfaces available to American gardeners. Glossy dark green leaves year round combined with purple-blue flowers every spring. Genuine ornamental value layered on top of one of the most thorough weed barriers of any flowering ground cover available. You are not choosing between something that looks good and something that suppresses weeds. You are getting both from the same planting. It spreads by runners that root at nodes, creating dense interlocking coverage across slopes, banks, and flat areas equally. Evergreen in zones 4 through 9, providing a year-round weed barrier with no seasonal gaps that allow spring and fall weed flushes to establish while your ground cover is dormant. It tolerates shade, moderate drought, poor soil, and the fierce root competition from established mature trees that defeats most alternatives. Slopes covered in grass require mowing on an incline, one of the most physically demanding and genuinely dangerous regular maintenance tasks in yard care, particularly for older gardeners. Slopes covered in vinca minor require nothing after establishment. In some states in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, vinca minor has naturalized into forest edges. If you garden near natural woodland areas, check your state's current guidance before planting it in adjacent beds. In contained garden areas away from natural land, it performs as one of the most reliable, low-maintenance ground covers available to American gardeners. That transparency matters because you deserve accurate information, not just the version of every plant that sounds best. Plant number 9, the sweet woodruff and wild ginger system. The final solution on this list is not a single plant. It is a system, and it is the most complete answer to the hardest weed problem in American gardening, the deep, dry shade under mature deciduous trees where you have probably stopped trying entirely and accepted that weeds and bare soil are simply what that spot produces. Sweet woodruff and wild ginger planted together function as a single, self-sustaining weed suppression system that does something no individual plant on this list accomplishes alone. Sweet woodruff spreads fast and fills the upper layer of the ground cover surface. Wild ginger spreads slower but roots deeper, binding soil and filling the gaps that sweet woodruff's above-ground spread leaves at the root level. Together, they create a two-layer barrier, surface coverage, and root-level occupation simultaneously that gives weeds no entry point at any level of the soil profile. Wild ginger, Asarum canadense, is native across most of the eastern United States. It evolved specifically for the conditions under eastern American deciduous trees. Its large, heart-shaped leaves overlap to create complete light exclusion at soil level. Nothing germinates underneath an established wild ginger patch because nothing receives enough light to attempt it. The combination is documented in native plant restoration work to reduce weed emergence by over 85 ppm in dry shade conditions within 3 growing seasons. 3 seasons of compounding establishment that produces a permanent result requiring 0 ongoing maintenance from you. Sweet woodruff is hardy in zones 3 through 8. Wild ginger native species performs reliably in zones 3 through 7. The combination works across zones 3 through 7, covering the entire Northeast, Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and Upper South, where the dry shade under mature trees problem is most common and most frustrating. That impossible spot under your oldest tree, the one where you have tried grass seed every fall, bark mulch every spring, and 3 different plants over the years and given up. This system turns it into the most low-maintenance, naturally beautiful area of your entire property. 1 planting, 2 plants, a problem you have probably considered permanent solved in 2 growing seasons. That is the most honest promise I can make about. You can plant every single one of these 9 options and still have weed problems if you do not know 3 things that determine whether ground covers suppress weeds or simply grow alongside them. The first thing is coverage density at planting. Ground cover suppress weeds through density. A single plant per square foot creates gaps weeds fill immediately. 3 plants per square foot creates coverage that closes before weeds can establish. The upfront cost of planting densely is recovered entirely in the first season through eliminated weeding hours, plant sparse, and you spend 2 years maintaining a half-established cover instead of enjoying a weed-free yard. The second thing is managing the establishment window. Every ground cover on this list needs 3 to 6 months of establishment before it suppresses weeds independently. During that window, and only that window, you need to keep the planting area clear. A 3-in layer of fine bark mulch between new plants during establishment prevents weed competition while roots develop. After establishment, the mulch breaks down and the ground cover takes over permanently. 1 season of managed establishment delivers years of maintenance, free coverage. The third thing is edge maintenance as the only ongoing task. Established ground covers do not need weeding inside the planting area. They need edging at the boundaries where they meet lawn paths or other beds. A clean physical edge maintained twice per season keeps the ground cover contained and makes the entire planting look intentional and professionally designed. That is the complete ongoing maintenance requirement for every single plant on this list. Edge twice a year, nothing else. If you've spent years maintaining a yard that takes more from you than it gives back, more time, more money, more physical effort every single season, these 9 plants are the beginning of changing that relationship permanently. Not temporarily, not until the next weed flush, permanently. This channel exists to give you the practical, zone-specific, honest information that makes your outdoor space work for you instead of against you every weekend of the growing season. Subscribe right now, free, always will be, every single week. I will keep delivering content that gives you your time back and makes your yard the one your neighbors stop to ask about. Tell me in the comments, what is the single worst weed spot in your yard right now? Place you dread every week, the spot that comes back no matter what you do, the area where you have tried everything and nothing has held. Drop it below with your state, and I will tell you exactly which plant or system from this list solves it permanently. I read every comment and I respond to as many as I can. Send this to one person you know who spends their weekend mornings weeding the same spots that come back every single week. No message needed, just the link. You might give them back every weekend morning they currently spend on their knees. Plant once, weed never. If this guide changed the way you look at the bare soil in your garden, please subscribe and like the video. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next treasure of garden knowledge will open soon.